Hello, reader friends.
Hello, reader friends. Happy Sunday. We're on
Happy
a
Sunday. It feels like forever since we've seen you guys. It's been a while. Hello.
we did a live stream, but it was on Instagram. So if you're not on there, following us on there, you would have
Yes.
missed us.
Yeah, we've been making a little bit of a transition onto Bookstagram. So if you usually follow us on Twitter, migrate on over to our Instagram because we have been kind of killing it
I
on
know,
there.
guys. We're actually good at that. We're way better at Instagram than we are.
Yeah, genuinely, I think we are. I don't know, Twitter can just be like a really weird space sometimes. Um, I don't know. And so we've just been having a hard time finding our footing there lately. So we kind of transitioned to Instagram. So if you're on Twitter, but you still want to see what we're doing, follow us on Instagram. We're going to start doing our happy hours on there on Instagram Live instead. It's a little bit more interactive, a little bit more casual. Trying to be more casual.
I also think that like just Instagram in general, we didn't like. I think before we forced ourselves to start doing it because we were always like, oh yeah, we gotta do the Instagram, we gotta do the Instagram. Like we were like, what are we gonna do on there? Like what are we gonna post? And then we just started posting like. Well, we realized it was a great way to post content from the book because you can do the imagery. So we have to find cool images, but it's not that hard. It's been fun. Like it's a really creative way to interact with a book that you're reading when it's a book club situation. So yeah, I'm proud of us. It looks nice. So yeah, but sorry, Twitter. We don't hate you. We're just distracted.
Yeah, got a little Twitter fatigue, a little bit. But thank you all for joining us. If you're here, say hello in the chat. Let us know what you've been up to. Let us know if you've read the book, which is Milltown.
Reckoning with What Remains.
And I spelled her name wrong. Let me fix that.
That is Kerri. I'm gonna say Arsenault because the French I don't know. Yeah, that's how you would pronounce it as a French person, I believe. Yeah, I studied French, so I should know.
I studied French in high school, which was like an embarrassingly long time ago now.
Twitter. Oh, yeah. Thanks for. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's some chronic anxiety for sure. Yeah, so we read Milltown. Well, not this month, last month at this point.
Oh, I know, right? Happy May.
Yeah. Yeah, to be honest, both of us got a little busy. Like I'm finishing up my second semester of grad school. Kateri with her like 50 jobs. No, her dance teaching ramped up a little bit. She's got her cute little recitals.
And my recitals all weekend because of COVID because we have to space everybody out. And then also my like day job, Snowflower Books, is we've kind of grown our team and we're doing so. Yeah, if you want to like sort of see what I do, you won't see a lot of me, but I'm behind the scenes. You can follow Snowflower Books, especially if you have children and you like children's books. We've been doing a lot of stuff there. So yeah, so Megan and I have been really busy.
Yeah, and we were supposed to have this live stream last weekend, but we pushed it back to this weekend because neither of us had finished the book. Which is fine. You know, sometimes life gets busy and shit happens. So,
we also had our poetry week, which we ended up posting on Instagram because we ended up getting a lot of poets that have followed us recently, and so that's been really fun. And some of our like friends too. A couple of my friends have been like, I want to start writing more, so they did poetry week with us last week. If anyone is here who was here last year for that, so that was fun. So it's been a momentous month, April, and a very fast month.
Yeah. So, and
Thank
that's
you all.
fine. This is fine.
That's what we do. That's what we
yes,
do.
that's what we're here for.
The cover and it got squished. I feel bad. Where did it go?
Yeah. So
yeah,
here it is.
Oh, it's so squished. Okay, you have it. This is what it looks like without the cover. If anyone,
yes,
like me, and always like has to derobe it.
Nah, I read it with the cover on.
Anytime I get a hardback book, I'm like, "What do you look like naked?"
Finished the book last week, but couldn't make it anyways. So glad it was postponed. Yay! Oh, that's good. That makes me happy that we postponed it then.
Oh, awesome!
And thanks for reading. Yes, Kerri is super cool.
Oh yeah, we should tell them about that, guys.
Yeah, she has been so interactive with us on Instagram. This is her first book. And so I think we might be one of the first book clubs to like be reading her book. And so she gave us like the sweetest compliment. She said that we did a great job of covering her book on Instagram, which was so sweet. So she's really cool. Her personality, I think, really shines through the book. I found myself like relating to her quite a bit.
Yeah.
She's super cool, and hopefully we'll have some exciting news regarding her at some point this month.
Yeah. Yeah, we're hopefully like basically nothing's official, but yeah, look forward to seeing her. We're known for having the authors on, so look forward to seeing her on our space at some point because she told us she was down. We just haven't nailed the date down yet because it's been busy, but that is our goal. So yeah, follow Kerri Arsenault. She's Kerri Arsenault on
Instagram.
Follow her. She's cool.
I can throw that up there.
We're always such fans of all of the authors. Like almost every book we read, we just end up fangirling over the author in some way.
Yeah, and like for me, growing up, like celebrities, yeah, like movie stars, TV stars, singers, stuff like that. But to me, like authors were celebrities too. Yeah. And so like those were my heroes. And so it was exciting. It's exciting for me and like a huge privilege that we've gotten to like meet so many of these authors, and that's super cool.
Yeah, it was like one of the coolest things of my life. Like I haven't done too many things that are as cool as that.
Yeah, I mean it's such a cool experience, like being able to like virtually meet some of these authors and actors too.
I know. We're gonna stop.
Yeah. But yeah, it's been such a cool experience, and I wanted to say like thank you guys for helping us create a space where Kateri and I kind of get to live out those little dreams.
And you guys too, hopefully.
Yeah.
We do the live streams with them, and hopefully it's cool for you to be able to be a part of it as well. But yeah, ditto that. Thank you guys for showing up.
Yes. And hopefully with COVID coming to the light at the end of the tunnel, it's still a little ways away, but at least we can see it. So hopefully at some point, those of you who have been super consistent and super great coming will start your own branch of our book club in person wherever you are. Eventually. So be on the lookout for more information on that. Up this summer. We got some exciting things in store for you guys this summer.
We'll reveal more at our next book club report.
Yes, there will be a lot more information to reveal at the next.
In May. It's May, at the end of May.
Yes, which is fine because we'll get to our book probably after this discussion, our next book. Our next book is like super doable by the end of May.
Yeah, totally doable. Okay, so let's get started.
Should
Thoughts.
we-
Let's start with the comment because someone beat us to it. I was surprised by how some recent events of the last couple of years made it in the book. Didn't realize it was this recently written. Yeah, as I was just finishing it recently. Yeah, like definitely some interesting things in there about our previous president who will
Yeah,
remain.
it
Yeah.
spans years. Like I think she's been writing this book. And to be honest, when you get to the end, I think she's still kind of writing this book. Like she's still very much in the situation that she was in at the end of the book, which was still going through all the files. Um, which we'll get into that. But yeah, I think this was a book written over several years. And then right up until the new, this most recent election.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty much. And then the actual timeline of the book itself technically spans hundreds of years. Like,
yeah.
Which was so cool and just made, I don't know, yeah, that's one of my favorite parts of the book, actually. So yeah, Megan, tell us your thoughts. So the story goes, I think I like kind of knew about this book and we were struggling to find a book for this month.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, well, this sounds like it would be in conversation with The War on Normal People, which was the book we read last April. But Megan was the one who actually went and like read the thing. And you were like, wow, this is interesting. So anyway, I want to hear your thoughts on overall.
Yeah. So yeah, I read the excerpt and I was like, wow, I'm already hooked. Like this sounds really interesting. It's like a book that you think is going to be about one thing and it ends up being about so many other things. It's called Milltown, right? So we're talking about Mexico, Maine, and it has the nickname of Cancer Valley, right? Because there's like so much cancer that happens because of the paper. Well, I can't say because of the paper mill. Allegedly, anecdotally, because of the paper mill that's in their town. And their town and Rumford, I think, is the other town that it affects. So Mexico and Rumford, Maine.
I think the mill is like technically in Rumford.
Yes, but a lot of people, she's from Mexico.
She's from Mexico. The mill is technically, I think, in Rumford.
Mm-hmm. But like everybody in those two towns.
Yeah. That whole valley, Cancer Valley. And then there's also the river, the Androscoggin River.
Yeah, so there's the Androscoggin River. So all of this takes place in Maine. And she mentions a little bit about Nova Scotia and like Prince Edward Island as well. When she goes into like her history, because her family are of Acadian ancestry, which there's a lot we could go into about that probably when we do our little knowledge is power section. But as far as my like initial thoughts go, I thought this was like really beautifully written, first of all. Yeah. Like her tone is really cool. But I really felt like I was being taken on a journey with her. I felt like I was like finding out all this information as she was, and like it was really interesting. And as I came to the end, I was a little like I was really wanting like a solution. And like spoiler alert, you don't really get one. Which I think is kind of the point. Like I said, I feel like she's still writing this book in a way. I think this is something that is never going to be over because it's not the little people that are responsible for it. It's the people in the corporations and the people in charge. So as long as they're in charge and as long as they're allowed to go in and do whatever they want, I mean, it's gonna keep happening. Like the mill's gonna keep going until we don't need paper anymore. And so it was really cool because we read More on Normal People, obviously last year, and it was it our April book last year? Yeah. And so this is really nice because in We're All Normal People, Andrew talks about the opioid epidemic. He talks about the manufacturing jobs leaving. There's one other thing I had in mind, but he talks about that more in like broad terms and not really personally. But Kerri brings those to the page and talks about them extremely personally because she comes from a manufacturing town and those jobs are being cut in half and then cut in half again and then cut in half again. So one place that, or one section of the factory that used to do 100 people is now down to like 12 people. And those are jobs that are gone and people are retiring, but they're not bringing those jobs back. And so that's super personal. And then her town also went through and is still going through the opioid crisis. People, dying from opioid overdoses and stuff. So it was just really interesting to kind of have that big picture last year and then to read someone who was like
from
family and town and like
yeah
is experiencing that. So it was really interesting to see that like really personal side of it.
Yeah, I would say like if in the future, if like especially being the Gang book club, like just if anyone were to ever ask me like what book should I follow up The War on Normal People with, I would definitely point to this book because you've got Andrew he's writing it like it's so fascinating. His picture, he has that bigger picture lens, like you were saying, and it's like he's looking at the, he's traveling around. So he's like this person who's kind of transplanted into these communities.
Mm-hmm.
And, he brings that perspective and how it relates to the rest of the world and the rest of the world economy and the culture. But hers is like a deeply rooted, like not just one state, but one little town. And like, her history is so embellished. Like you have to be a native person at this point to be more. And she talks about how her deep history as an Acadian person, which is I don't know if you said, but French people who came early, like 1600s, like around when like the whole area was first colonized and like really did live off of the land and like actually had an alliance with the native people. I won't say it was perfect, but it seemed like, they actually did work together and live together. So it's pretty deeply rooted, right? And then there was, we'll get into that, but there was the whole like diaspora that happened with the Acadian people. And that was like one foreshadowing of things going wrong. And then all of a sudden the Industrial Revolution comes in. And so, it just really like, it's so deep. It paints this very different picture at the same time talking about so much of what is in the War on Normal People. So it just gives you that like really authentic personal side to all of those issues, whereas the War on Normal People just doesn't give you that. It's like data, like we were reading through it, like this is just like facts and like I just have to like take a picture of it and like review it. Some of that book is kind of like that. So this is definitely a great follow-up to that book, but also just an amazing book in and of itself, to your point of how beautiful of a writer she is. Definitely like it makes you laugh at some points, but like the majority of the book it's just like, it's that kind of like searing kind of writing where like she really gets you. Like when she is talking about stuff that like you can feel her emotion, but the writing is not like, it's not a diary type of book. Like kind of, not to say that Know My Name, which we read last month, was that kind of book either, but it had that real personable feel. And not to say that Milltown's not personable either, but you feel like you're also reading something that could be in the New York Times. It's readable, but it's also like, yeah, that was something that I just enjoyed, is the how she crafted her words.
Yeah, she was really talented with her descriptions of things.
Yeah.
Like, I would always think about Kateri because Kateri loves like nature description. And she did a phenomenal job. Like I felt like I could picture everything she was talking about.
Yeah, I felt like I was there in Maine. I've never been to Maine. I've been to a couple different places on the East Coast, but yeah, I've never been to Maine. And so, but to feel like I kind of like, she names like so many of the like businesses in Mexico, you know, like there's a part of me that feels like I kind of have been there. It's
Yeah.
not the same. I'm not saying it's the same, but like you still, there's something special that like, that's just one of the magic things about books is that, and that this book does so well, where I feel like kind of connected to this place and this community now. And like, it's like something that I get to like have, like you get to take that with you when you read a book like this. At the same time, there's a lot of very valuable information. Like it's to me, it's one of the kind of perfect books that like we could have. Actually, I think the last two books in a row really did that really well. No My Name did that, where her life experience simply provided a lot of information, but it also had the personal side, so the humanity side, and this book does that too. So that was honestly one of the biggest things. Like I love learning what I learned, but like you can just you can do a Google search and find a lot of the same information. It's not going to affect you in the way that it does when you have a book like this, like just draw you in. So anyway, hello again. Oh, I saw someone comment something.
It definitely like also, I was going to talk about too, like speaking of description and like feeling like you knew the town. I feel like I know the people there. she like did a great job of bringing the people around her to life, and it really reminded me of Union.
Yeah.
This book I feel like was so perfect because it brought in so many of our past books. Like I thought of A Mind Spread Out on the Ground because of the indigenous peoples and talking about like nature and what we're leaving the future.
The Seven Generations Principle. I totally wrote that at some point.
Yeah, me too. And
Leslie, I think.
Yeah, same. Like I wrote that in. I was like, oh, A Mind Spread Out on the Ground. This is so perfect.
Yeah.
And then, but Union, like a lot of it reminded me of Union because if you guys didn't read Union, really good book. These two best friends are going on a road trip for like 3 years, over the course of 3 years, and they're just talking to people all around America, trying to find common ground. And one of them was a Democrat, one of them was a Republican. And yes, they would have a lot of arguments, but also they had a lot more in common than they thought, because at the base of those arguments, they were seeing the same issue from different sides. But they both wanted this kind of the same kind of solution, which was for everybody to have a better life. And they would go around America just talking to people. And in a lot of ways, Milltown reminded me of that, because everyone in Maine was so different. Everyone was so different. And honestly, like, you know, being from the East Coast, there's usually that like connotation that like if you're like above the Mason-Dixon line, you're of a certain, I don't want to say class. And then if you're below, you're like less educated, you know, there's that certain connotation, which like I've been all up and down the East Coast and like nobody really fits those boxes as well as we would like to think that they do, which she also touches on that. But when you're reading about Mexico, Maine, it's almost like you're reading about like a little southern town somewhere.
Yeah.
Which was so interesting to me because I was like, oh, you know, Maine, I had like a certain perception of in my mind of like what Maine is, even though I've never been there. You know, you just have certain pictures in your mind of certain states. And they're generalizations, and generalizations aren't always great. But yeah, like it was just like a small town. I was like, oh, I guess like all small towns are the same. Like everybody knows everybody. You're really looking out for each other. You can be like everyone's greatest enemy, but everyone's best friend. Like it's really tight knit, so they don't take to strangers very well, outsiders. So yeah, it just really reminded me of Union and finding that common ground and pushing past those perceptions that even I had. There was a whole section when she was talking about Trump and his election. There's a whole section that I wrote in the book. This is really hard for me to read, but I needed to hear it.
Yeah.
Like I needed to hear that, like, and it's my own perceptions can be wrong. Like, I needed to hear that, and I think she's a really good job of addressing that without excusing behavior.
She lays it out, and she doesn't go on and on about it. And
No.
it's very much, she literally says, I underlined it, like, Trump is the symptom, not the disease, guys. She literally, like, verbatim says that. It's like a short part where she addresses it, but she really does. Like, she doesn't hold back. She's not, and she's not talking about Trump. She's talking about the people in her town who voted for Barack Obama, and then turned around and voted for Trump. So,
and also voted to legalize weed and voted for ranked choice voting in the same election.
Like, she puts this list of all the things that they voted for, which are all these really progressive policies, and then they voted for Trump, so it's like they want change, so interesting stuff. And yeah, I appreciated that as well. So let's check in with we have some comments that may help us. Written throughout her whole life, including the present. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, I was thinking about this too, because I love reading my books, like a physical copy.
Yeah.
And I kind of thought, I was like, oh my gosh, if we want to get rid of that pollution, we need to stop making paper. That means I have to read my books on a tablet.
Like, the moment where you're like reading Milltown and you're like,
yes. I got a little anxious for a second because I was like, no. Yeah. But no, for sure. Because here's a decision. I know we usually talk about this at the end, but this makes me think of a decision I made. I buy notebooks. I don't use notebooks very much.
No.
But I love notebooks. I think they're pretty. I like pretty things. I like the feeling of the new paper and your pen is like running across it and it's so smooth, but I'll use like 3 pages of it. And then I won't use it again. I have one. And the thing is, that's wasteful. It really is, because it just sits there and it's not doing anything. So that's a decision I've made. Stop buying notebooks that I don't need.
Yeah, at least that you don't need.
That I don't need, yeah.
Yeah. Women. Well, I was pretty terrified at the whole talk when she mentioned the tampon.
Yeah.
Whoa.
I was like, oh yes, people thought it was weird for not using tampons.
Yeah. Not to get TMI, but I am definitely looking to make some changes there. And there's options
a lot. Yeah. She goes into that and diapers.
But
yeah, and diapers.
There's options out there. You can Google it. We won't go any further. We did that last month, so we won't do it this month.
We're not here to talk about periods all the time.
But it was the most invasive thing on the list.
Yeah.
That, right? Other than which is not paper, but she talked about, which I guess this is the other conversation, because she does go into other things besides paper and the mill. But then the next part is like the Nestle Corporation coming in, talking about how like drinking out of plastic bottles is really bad for you. It's like not good, guys. So yeah, there's that. But I do have my boom. Make it fun, guys.
Yeah. I have another one. I like shaker bottles. I'll use shaker bottles for my water because I like the lip. So I use shaker bottles and I'll just fill it up with water.
Constantly, like
yeah. Yeah. But yeah, make it fun because it's not just bad for the environment. It's actually bad for you too. Like she was talking about, okay, we'll get into this when we do knowledge is power, which we should probably get to after we finish time. But one of the things she talks about with dioxin is how the reason the EPA does, and this is later in the book, the reason the EPA doesn't regulate it is because if they posted the cancerous risk, if they posted what the toxic levels are, we wouldn't even be able to eat a hamburger because that is too much dioxin.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like,
how?
I was like, that's like, I don't eat a ton of meat all the time, but like, that's like one of the changes I made this year. But like, those are like my biggest guilty pleasure is a good old cheeseburger from like Five Guys. Like when I'm having a tough week. And now I'm like, ooh.
Oh, rats. Bring on that fake meat, guys. Let's make it good. That was a pun.
Yeah, for me too. I was like, oh my God. But we wouldn't actually be able to eat like anything, to be honest. Like fish was on that list and a lot of stuff was on that list. And I was like, ugh, ugh. Yeah, it was a big thing. But yeah, this is the solution is automation and UBI, but all those people in those jobs will need to transition their purpose. Hard to move away from all of your history though. Yeah, and she goes into that about how, and this is something, another part that gets really personal that we didn't really get in More on Normal People is the loss of identity that comes with automation. If your town, their whole lifeline and their whole everything, she was saying you graduate and you work at the mill. And that's just your job. Like everybody has a job related to the mill. And if you don't have that, then like who are you as a town? And who are you as a people? And so there is that like loss of identity that comes. And so you can't just take away the jobs. You have to have something else. Like you were saying, like you need to transition your purpose. I like that. I like that phrase. Because they do need something else. With the jobs are gone, well, what else do? We haven't been conditioned to do something to thrive rather than survive. So yeah, like UBI definitely has to be a part of that conversation, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. And she talks about how she doesn't bring up UBI, but she talks about how she's been so focused on like the mill and the dioxin and all the pollution and stuff like that. But there are all these other issues that really do plague her town. And like one of them she go into is like food poverty and poverty in general. Food poverty and hunger and with children especially and stuff like that. And so yeah, like that would right there, like you have people who are, I say people, but children specifically, who are less likely to be going hungry because they have a basic income. And that is a big deal, like it's kind of hard to find your purpose if you're not eating, like,
Yeah, and then struggling with the perceptions that come from that too. Like they were talking about how one of the kids came to school with one shoe, and the teacher's automatic response was, "Oh, their parents were probably on drugs." And it's like, well, that's just not true, and we know that because we read Made.
Yeah. Other book. Oh my god.
Yes. And Made, Stephanie's whole story is how struggling to be a single mom in this economy, she had like a full-time job and could not make ends meet. Like, and and not that, and I'm not saying this to say that, like, if you do have an addiction that you're less worthy of this, because you're not. Everybody is worthy of living the way you need to. Like we all need the necessities, no matter addiction, mental illness, whatever, you are still worthy of that. But that perception, just like Stephanie didn't have that. She didn't have an addiction. She was just a single mom who just could not get ahead of it.
And also the irony of that whole thing is like, okay, his mom was probably a drug addict. Like, why does that make it okay? Like,
yeah, like why is that okay?
Okay.
Yeah. Right. Like, oh, his mom's probably a drug addict, so he doesn't deserve shoes. Like, no. Like, say that out loud. Say that out loud. It doesn't make any sense. So yeah, she hits a lot of topics in that. But I think this is a nice transition.
Yeah. Knowledge is power, guys.
So we'll let you know.
If you can like pull up our Instagram, you can actually see the visual, because we work hard on the visual.
Kerri works hard on the visual. This is all her. I like to give credit where credit is due. Knowledge is power is all Kerri.
Actually, I have to pull it up because I don't save them. Like I only have the one from the last one we did. So I have to pull up the one on the thing.
Let's see.
So going to the Instagram page.
Our very first one is about dioxin.
Yeah.
So hopefully you'll be able to see this. But if you're on Instagram, it looks like this. Knowledge is power. And then you'll swipe and you'll get all of the information. And a quote from the book.
So, I'm on sacrifice zones. So the first two that we did really go hand in hand in a lot of ways. But yeah, specifically dioxin. And we're by no means experts on this. So that's kind of why I'm directing you to this thing. So I'm like, what did I put? We just basically take the info from the book and then I might do a little extra like researching. But again, not all the time in the world, but trying to do what we can to help, especially if you're, not able to read along with us a month. So you can hopefully rely on this type of thing. So anyway, so dioxin, a toxic byproduct of the chlorine paper bleaching process and mill sludge waste incineration. So byproduct, the fact that they're, in order to get the paper this pristine white, because like we just think paper is white. Oh, like I kind of had that experience where, I just thought paper was white. And then I have an aunt who's like awesome hippie generation lady. And so one time for my cousin, her daughter's birthday, we made paper. And I was like in education and how like paper is like, it was like this really coarse and it was like not white and stuff like that. So anyway, we just take for granted that paper is this perfect white. So they obviously actually super bleach. It's one of those things that's so obvious. Like I feel silly talking about it, but anyway, so obvious, but yeah. So we have written here, used in herbicide defoliant agent orange, dioxin specifically. It has been determined to cause cancer in rats. The EPA, which is the Environmental Protection Agency, has determined it a probable human carcinogen. So that is dioxin. The quote we use, I don't know if I put the page number. I did on the other ones, but I hadn't thought of it yet. So in 1985, when I graduated from high school, the Marine Department of Environmental Protection, DEP, was alerted by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency that dioxin was found in the fish downstream from 7 main paper mills, including ours. So that was 1985. So yes, and so there's a lot more. The whole book is practically about this. So yeah, so if you weren't aware of it, now you are, so be aware. And so that's kind of what we were talking about earlier, where there's like traces of so much of it in so many things. Feminine hygiene products as one example.
Yeah. Food.
And food. You're magical at finding things. Do you know where that is?
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. I'm pretty sure I had it like highlighted because I was like, what?
Yeah. And so essentially it's, this is something that, the mill and the corporations involved, like Kerri does the research and sees that like they're doing a lot of effort to keep the information hidden, but she's able to, uncover information about how they're finding traces of dioxin in the water, in the land, and at the same time, cancer rates are going up and up and up and up, and all of these crazy diseases, really.
Yeah, but it's like really hard to prove. And it's interesting because I'm taking epidemiology for one of my requirements for my school, and we talk about how something can qualify as a cluster, and it's hard to make cancer qualify for a cluster because you have to prove that, because a cluster has to be higher than expected rates of whatever you're looking at. And it's hard to prove that with cancer because you can't count each individual person. So if someone in a family has it, only one of them counts. So not everybody in the family counts towards the cluster. Only one person does. Because everybody in the same family could get cancer anyways, no matter where you are. So it doesn't count. which was very interesting to me. And then there's only and only certain types of cancer qualify. So if it's a more common type of cancer, I don't think it qualifies for the cluster. It has to be like.
That also sounds like a loophole.
Yeah. And so it was just very interesting because it was like, it's really hard for you to qualify it. Even if anecdotally you're like, look, everyone in this town is affected by cancer in some way. That just doesn't seem normal.
Yeah.
It's hard to prove it.
Yeah. Did you like the part, and you look like you might have found it, but really quickly, did you like the part where she references 1984? Because Megan is a fan of 1984. On 36, she talks about, it's kind of like, I think it makes sense that it's earlier on in the book because she gets into just all the BS that comes with this research that she's doing. As in the book 1984, the prostitution of language allows everything. Like what we were talking about earlier with how amazing of a writer. Like, prostitution of language, holy shit. I'll read it again. As in the book 1984, the prostitution of language allows everything. An industrial dump becomes a winter stockpile, and that makes it all right. So yeah, a lot of just it's like, is it gaslighting? Like, I don't know, you know?
No, I felt like a lot of it throughout this book was like gaslighting and victim blaming. And I wrote that down in several parts where I was like, this seems super victim blaming. Like, oh, you chose to work at the mill, so if you get cancer, that's your fault.
Yeah.
It's
or
like,
you die if you a crazy accident happens.
Yeah, oh, that's your fault. You weren't sticking to these safety protocols that we don't enforce. Like, it's
you weren't being careful.
They put all of the blame and all of the responsibility on the backs of people who have no control over it. And that was something we talked about with Eric Holthaus as well, where we were like, oh, everyone needs to recycle. If you're not recycling, you're not doing your part. But it's like, I hate to break it to you, recycling doesn't do anything.
Yeah, it's not even getting recycled now that we.
No, you know, and it's like
just going in the ocean, actually.
Right. Yeah. It's like, oh, you know, like don't leave me, that helps the environment. And it's like, I'm sorry, each of us individually choosing not to eat meat is like not going to do much because we're not making most of the pollution. You know what I mean? Like we're not the ones that are responsible for most of it. And so I'm not saying don't do your part. If it makes you feel better, like do it for sure. Yeah. But it's like, it's not on us. Like we're not the ones doing it. And it's the same with Mexico and Rumford is like the mill, which used to be very like back in the day, used to be very like employee kind of run. Like they had a great relationship. Eventually, once new ownership took place, they kind of severed that relationship because it was that the era of the stakeholder is the most important and not the employees. Like the bottom line is more important than the employee safety or the employees. And so they had like several strikes and that kind of just broke that trust. And then ever since then, it was like, these people are dying, but they didn't care. Like they wouldn't even list them. They had a memorial for like accidental deaths, which I put in there too. I was like, well, why do they always want a memorial and never want to? I said, why is it easier to erect a memorial than it is to enact change? Because it reminded me of Know My Name.
I know, I thought the same thing. The memorial bullshit.
But they only put like the accidental deaths, and they didn't put any of the people who died because they had asbestos in their lungs. Yeah. Or they developed cancer.
And like, to be clear, like in the end, she mentions how like, even though someone, I forget who it was, the individual's name, but she names them, but they go to the doctor and the doctor's like, you have asbestos or something. You have something.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have something, like you have scars. Like that is not pneumonia. It is not from smoking. And the doctor had said this and put it in writing, but the factory or whatever wouldn't accept it. They just wouldn't.
Yeah, they had like their own physicians on site. Yeah, and the physician on site was like, "Oh, you have pneumonia,"
and then they ran that doctor out of town.
Yeah, the doctor who said that it was chemical burns, they ran him out of town.
Like that is straight up like criminal. And so then going back to the memorial thing, it's not just like I just wanted to make that clear, because it's not just like, it's bad enough to be like just memorializing these deaths and not these, because these are obviously more even, or I don't even know, they're both equally like,
they both suck
for them.
Yeah.
I don't even understand the logic of like both, mean that change needs to happen. I guess the other one is just more like it goes beyond the factory than just someone getting like their hurt in a piece of equipment. The actual stuff is, the actual pollution is a bigger issue. I guess that must be why. Anyway, so yeah, just to make that clear, like it was like they freaking do know, like they fully know what they're doing. Like there's no, it's pretty much there in black and white.
Yeah, that's insane. But I did find the part about where they're talking about the food that it's in. I couldn't find the
What page?
other one, but page 307, she's talking to someone. I can't remember what he did specifically. She talked to so many people.
Yeah.
But this person, I think, worked. He was the science director at the Center for Health, Environment, and Justice. And they were the ones who brought attention to the love canal crisis, which that's a whole other thing you should look into, because I learned about that in class and that's insane. But anyway, so she's talking to him about like, why doesn't the EPA, like what's the difference between the non-cancerous risk and the cancerous risk? Because they released a draft of the cancer risk, but they didn't ever release a final. But in 2012, they released the non-cancer risk assessment in its final form. And she was like, well, why don't they do that? Why don't they go back and finish the job? And he said, when the EPA ran the dioxin risk numbers for cancer, those numbers came out so high, it would have significant ramifications, a debilitating economic impact for the entire US economy. What? I hear myself asking him, not quite registering what he's saying. Put it this way. If the EPA used cancer risk rate data to determine how much dioxin would be allowed in food, you wouldn't be able to buy a McDonald's hamburger. McDonald's specifically, I ask? No, he says, and says that this threshold for dioxin is so low based on the 2003 cancer risk assessment that almost all meat, fish, and animal byproducts like butter and milk would have dioxin levels that exceed government standards for how much would be allowed in food. Even one simple hamburger could do a person harm. McDonald's is just a handy reference. He reiterates that the EPA doesn't currently list dioxin as a carcinogen. So, and he said, because they published the non-cancer risks, they can just walk away because people are like, oh, okay, it's not a problem then.
So they just have this info that they're sitting on.
Yeah, and they just refuse to do anything about it because the bottom line, and she talks about that a lot, about how like the bottom line is just more important in society than people are. Like,
well, that also like that sounds like that to me is like, it is such this, they're saying like it's going to be this big thing, like the economy, right? When you were saying bottom line, but like the economy is like bigger than a bottom line. Is like the ecosystem of everything. So it's going to be this huge disruptor. So I'm like, okay, yeah, that's true. Like I get that, but why is the answer to just ignore it? It's like climate change, right? It's the exact same thing as climate change, where we're like, all these scientists are saying like, this shit is going to hit the fan. It could decimate the human race and lots of other races or species.
Yeah.
It could do that, but oh well, there's nothing we can really do about it other than making real change, like serious change. That's going to be too much of a disruption to the economy.
Yeah, the economy that doesn't even benefit us, the economy that benefits them. Right. So it's like, yeah, it's yeah. I mean, it's insane, but we don't have that much longer. What else are we going to talk about real quick?
I feel like, yeah, if you want to see the other ones, go to the I think that one is like, we hit a lot. The second one is about sacrifice zones, which is kind of like just what we were literally just talking about, like kind of a similar like symptom of that whole huge ill, which is like we know about these things called sacrifice zones, which exist where it's like typically low income, underserved communities that are getting barraged by pollution, and it's really, really bad. And they're sacrifice zones because we don't do anything about it. So anyway, and there's a whole book on it too that Kerri recommends. So anyway, if that interests you, check that out. Okay, so we really got into like the informational side. We should maybe talk about, before we go, we should talk about the like personal side, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I was really interested in, or really struck by, she talks a lot about home, like the concept of home,
Mm-hmm.
which for her, like dating back to like the idea of the Akkadian people, and that the diaspora that happened and stuff. And then she leaves Maine. And so as someone who comes from not a little bit of I would say more farming and industrial town, that's considered a small town, even though it's not that small.
Mm-hmm.
Like left and went to a more like city affluent place. Like I really related to that, and seeing how it's like for me, and I think probably for her too, like falling off, and like the town is not thriving, and it's like disintegrating, and people are getting sick. Like actually, it was like weird. The last time I like went, it just reminded me of this memory. Like last time I went back, I ran into a woman from my church who was this like always this really bubbly, like vivacious person. She was in her middle age then, but she's like aged a little bit since. And I could tell she was ill. Like she was ill. Like she was very visibly ill, and like ran into her, and I didn't like ask her anything personal, or it was just like nice to see her. But anyway, like that whole part that runs through the majority of the book. And then she tries to actually get involved as she lives in Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
Not even that far, right?
No, but they see it as like
Yes.
other. And then she married a man from Massachusetts, and they call Massachusetts massholes.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because she feels like even though she lived out what her parents wanted for her, which was better, it seemed like she did the wrong things according to people in the town.
Right. Yeah. And according to her home, like her family in a way, because that's how she really describes that culture is so tight knit. And so from afar, she's trying to help them keep the bad guys out when the corporation is trying to come in and take their water. And it's like they know, and they're able to prove that they're going to be taking more water than they should be, or like is sustainable for the town. So
but that's not all spring water, so that's fraud.
Yeah, basically. And so it's the case is so in their favor, and so they're
Allegedly.
still.
Sorry, allegedly. I don't want to get in trouble.
All of this is alleged.
All of this is alleged.
But just saying. Yeah. So they had this big struggle, and she's like really trying to help, and then it gets to the point where like they just don't want her help anymore because she doesn't live there, and they're like, you don't live here, like you're not one of us anymore, or something like that. So anyway, and it also was a concept that was talked about in The War on Normal People in an interesting way, because of how we feel. Like the whole notion of like I need to leave my small town to make something of myself. I've really come to see that as like a stage of late capitalism or something, like question that, like, why though? Like, why do you, in order to be someone, do you have to leave your home? Like, I'm not saying that like I don't think we should live in a society now, like this should change completely. Like, I think we're probably always going to have big cities, and, like that's always going to exist. It just sucks to me that like, there's this sense of, well, if you stay, you took the easy route. You didn't make anything of yourself. Like you're kind of just choosing to be a nobody or something. But if you leave, then also like you lose that home. Like there's something that you lose. And it kind of sucks. So anyway, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I thought she did a really good job of like kind of like reckoning with what remains. She did a really good job of like reckoning with that, where it's like she still really cares about her town. Like she really cares about the people and what happens. And so she's kind of like, right now I'm just taking a back seat. Like I'm doing this stuff in the background and I'll still fight for them, but I don't have to be the one leading the charge, which is what I say all the time, right? Is like to make change, you don't have to be the leader. Sometimes you're just the people in the background who are kind of chugging along and doing what you can. And more of us are that, you know what I mean? It's the leaders that kind of get everyone together, but it's the people in the background who are really getting the stuff done, you know? And so she's kind of taking that role at the moment, you know, she's just quietly going through the files and trying to figure out both her family history, because that's how this whole thing started. She just wanted to know her family history.
Yeah.
And with that, she was saying it's all intertwined. Like, oh, there's a really, really good quote actually for that. Because she's talking about like connecting the lines. Oh man, I really want to find it because I was like, this is beautiful. It was just a really pretty way to put it, you know, because she just does like, she just has a really beautiful way with words. But that particular part where she's just talking about like she started following this one line, and it turned into something different. So it's on page 282 into 283. There are lines we follow, family lines we shouldn't cross, picket lines, and lines we hardly dare to bridge, silences among ourselves. There are also lines that lead us down an odd path, babe, the blue ox, or lines that bisect the haves and the have-nots, sacrifice zones and football teams. Then there are lines we follow because it's the fastest way downhill, skiing. The only straight line I found in this whole damn mess is the clothesline where my mother hung her wash.
I love that one too. We should share that one tomorrow on Instagram.
Yes. That's a really, really good one. And I think that was a really succinct way to kind of show the journey she's taken in this book. Yeah, which is that there's no, like, how do you move on? You know, like what do you do when there is no straight line connecting all these things, because everything is like intersecting with each other. But
yeah, I think so too. Yeah, I think it's interesting that she doesn't really provide an answer, and she does talk about how she does consistently bring up, I think, not just for like lawful purposes or whatever, about how she's not an expert in any of this. She's not a real investigator. Like she really doesn't, like she's a writer. Like she works for, her job is working in publishing, you know? So it kind of reminds me of Blueprint for Evolution, and also The Future Earth. Sorry, I was just, sometimes I think of the author's name when I think of that book. The Future Earth too, where it's talking about how like just normal people, like, and obviously I guess the war on normal people too. But yeah, like we are just normal people and we all just need to do our part. And so I think her answer kind of like actually in a way is the book itself. Like the book exists. Yes, it's super ironic that books are made of paper. But in any way, it's ironic, but at the same time, it's like almost a form of protest. Like I'm going to use your paper to like lay it all out, you know, and put that information out there, and hopefully people will do with it what they will, which is why we picked it. Yes.
Yeah. I thought about Blueprint for Evolution a lot through this too, like a lot, because Blueprint for Evolution is all about making change. The way you make change on a global scale is through making change in your own communities, right? And in your own space where you are. And, you know, it's going to take the towns of Mexico and Rumford, Maine, towns like that who constantly fight bad change, because they want change. They want good change. They know what change they need. And it's going to take towns like that constantly fighting back. And they might lose a little bit, because they did kind of lose to Nestle, but they still fought. And I feel like that's the thing that they can't take from us, is like we're going to keep fighting, right? Like we're going to have our own forms of protest. This book club is one of our own forms of protest. We are giving you knowledge. We are giving you the tools to go out into your own communities and like make those changes however you can. And you don't have to make the change the way I make change. You know, like I have different ways of doing things than you do, and like that's fine. But we're trying to give you those tools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that what you just said there reminded me of how like they didn't win against Nestle, but they actually fought. Totally reminded me of This Is an Uprising because about how with the chapter on Gandhi specifically about how like they were people were kind of upset with Gandhi for how he kind of gave in, but to him, well, you can tell the story, but like the first big battle he waged against the British colonizers, the first big battle he waged, that one, he kind of gave in a little bit. He didn't like ask for everything that they were actually asking for. He didn't like demand it. But to him, the win was the fact that he got a seat at the table. So then the next time, you know, like the next time he fought, they knew that they had that, they, you know, that was possible, and so that they could go further. So, you know, and like a big thing about this is like hopefully people in that area, in that community, even if it's just like one or two people read this book, which maybe that's something we should ask her. Like, how many people does she know from, you know, her town have read this? Because it's like, well, a big thing is like, if you know your history, like if you know your community's history, if they know, if like the younger generation knows this history, they'll be emboldened by that, you know, like where if you feel like there's no history and if every generation feels like they're constantly the first generation to be dealing with this stuff, they haven't learned any of the lessons from the previous tries, and they don't have that sense of like identity from it, it might not go well. But if they have that, maybe it will make a difference in some way. So yeah, I think that's all. I think we just made our bookcase for humanity right there.
Yeah. And answered, where do we go from here? We answered that too. You know, so what's coming up? Let's talk about that.
Right.
Let's do some housekeeping.
Housekeeping for May. So other than keep an eye out for potential May, or we could see maybe June, conversation with Kerri Arsenault herself. Follow her on Instagram. Other than that, I guess we're going to show our book for May.
Ready? 1, 2, 3.
All right, Yang Gang, here we go. UBI month, I guess. We did it last year in June. And this year in June, we're going to also mix it up, you'll see. So we're doing it next month, which we always like to have the things be try to have a continuing conversation from the last book. So I feel like this just makes sense from not only this Milltown, but also the way that Milltown was sort of a continuation of this. I almost said This Is an Uprising. Which one? The War on Normal People. And there's definitely parts in Milltown where she doesn't talk about UBI, but there was that part. Remember that part where she talks about like how like certain generations didn't have a choice, like lacking choice to leave or whatever, stuff like that. Anyway, and also it's a book about UBI. The subtitle is How a Universal Basic Income Would End Poverty, Revolutionize Work, and Remake the World by Annie Lowry. So, and if anyone's read this, let us know, because this is a book that I think more likely people in Yang Gang probably have read. But
yeah, it was definitely recommended. And you know, we love to highlight women in the UBI world. It's a largely male-dominated conversation. So we love.
She was on Yang Speaks, and so when she her and Andrew talked about their own like reasons why they wrote a book that did heavily center around UBI. Though I think her book centers around it more than The War on Normal People. He doesn't talk about UBI until the end. This is clearly a book about UBI. So she talks about how he really comes at it from a specific angle of like, we all know automation, where she comes at it from almost more just like the moral side. I forget if that's what she said, but it was, you know, she seems like she's really going to go into it. So Super excited for it. And it is definitely one of the maybe the shortest book we've ever read. It's got small font, but
it's very short.
It is short.
It's like it was
100 pages. Notes, getting past the notes.
It's a lot of notes, so it's not a lot to read.
Oh, it's 208 pages, so
yeah, it's not a long read. This is the bulk of the book right here.
Cool. So I'm excited.
Me too.
Talk about some answers too. That's the other thing that's exciting to me about a book like this. Is it's kind of it is a book that it is hard to find books that focus on answers, not books that focus on problems. But I hope it seems like this will be.
Happy birthday! Happy birthday!
This is at all our birthday present to you, then I hope
make sure you enter a giveaway then, because we always have a giveaway every month.
Yeah, well, on Instagram now.
We're gonna on Instagram.
Yeah, so
usually you have pretty good odds because we're still building those numbers a little bit. So
give that a go. Other than that, I think it's time to go.
I know. For some reason, did you ever watch Out of the Box?
Yes.
For some reason, that came into my head. The so long farewell to you, my friends.
I'm for it. We can make that a thing.
All right. I know. Okay. I guess that's everything. So happy reading. Is that what we've decided?
Yeah,
is that sign off?
In May.
Yeah. Bye.